Salvete, mihi nomen est Stella, et hoc est Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 204 for March MMXXI. Julius Caesar, may he rest in peace. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by the Batman universe and Capes and Lunatics Sidekicks. Batgirl the Oracle is also brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out MileHighComics.com. I have to say that I was going to record this yesterday. And yesterday I had no intro planned, and I was thinking, what can I do? Because I did want to mention some heavy stuff, which I'll give a trigger warning before I start doing that. But I thought, oh man, that's not the way to do an intro. And then I ended up not recording because it sounded like someone was doing some heavy metal stuff, like hacksawing metal, or it just sounded like there was a chop shop going on outside of my apartment really close by, and I just knew that it would be picked up on the microphone. So I thought, now I can't record today, but I've got a funny intro, I guess, of why someone is doing whatever they're doing. I guess probably some car repairs potentially, but now I have an intro, so there you go. And it is 2 days past, or 2 days beyond, the departure of one of my dearly beloveds, Julius Caesar. Guys, Julius Caesar. And I hope that you guys wore black. I wore black today in celebration. Also some Latin. Id est quod id est. It is what it is, just to celebrate and memorialize him. Unfortunately, Carolyn Coca, my former chief Tata correspondent, I've had to cancel her. So she said something pretty disrespectful to me. I basically asked if she was going to mourn, or, will she wear black tomorrow? And she said, absolutely not. He had it coming, and referenced Chicago. And I thought, the utter disrespect. So she's been canceled, at least for Batgirl 2 Oracle. So we might not hear her again on this particular show. I did want to talk about some heavy stuff in my intro. Pardon me, I just noticed that there's some lag, so I want to turn off all sorts of Wi-Fi so that I don't have to deal with things. Let me connect all of this stuff together, because a bunch of random things were coming together to all coincide for the same heavy material. So when I first say trigger warning, I'm going to mention, and I will say briefly, I think I'll talk about it for a little bit, but I think it warrants a larger conversation. I think it needs to be a conversation. It shouldn't just be me talking to the camera. And I would love people to also send feedback and their ideas. I don't know if this demands an exploratory episode all of its own. I don't know how that would be received, but I think it's a good question to ask. So the trigger warning is that I am going to talk about rape and sexual assault briefly. Now, the reason why I want to bring it up again is really, it's connecting to the Shipper special, the Shipper Spotlight special that Don and I did. And it, I one of my favorite stories, of course, is Identity Crisis. And he had brought up, obviously one part that is problematic with that particular story is the fact that there is this rape, and whether the story necessitated it, or, could there have been a way around it? And he brought up, I think either he or Harold, whenever there's a rape scene or a rape happens in any form of media, you kind of step back and ask yourself, was this necessary? What point did it have, or what purpose does it serve? And could you get away with getting close to the edge but not stepping off? So I don't know, just any minor, like touching, almost like unwanted touching,
no consent, that right there, because at least for me, when I see something like that, and or I'm noticing like this is where it's going, oh my gosh, what's happening? Perhaps this girl is passed out drunk and there's a guy approaching her, which there's a connection there too that I'll talk about soon. And then perhaps it stops, like someone can, like, that was enough. That was enough. We were on, there was some tension there was suspense, definitely some discomforture, I think, for viewers, hopefully. So is that enough? And this popped up again. So this conversation, I don't think there was really an answer when Don and I talked about it. And I thought about it a while afterwards, just the purpose of rape scenes in media and should we even have them? And that discussion popped up again because over at Required Reading, which just came out, episode, oh gosh, was it episode 51 or 52? I led a discussion on some epistles from Ovid's Herodes. And if you're not aware of what the Herodes are, Ovid writes these letters from the point of view of women in classic epics. And this was, well, it was unknown, right? You're giving words and a perspective to a woman in the epic. And not saying that, of course, they had some before, like Penelope, of course, she spoke in the Odyssey, but just to see it from her perspective was different. So we did Penelope writing to Odysseus, Dido writing to Aeneas, um, Medea writing to Jason, and then we had a couplet of Paris writing to Helen, and then Helen responding to that letter that Paris wrote. And so, focusing on just that last one, we did the rape did pop up, and I can't remember how that conversation went, but then I brought up, here's this Oh, it must have been that terrible film that I saw a section of, Helen of Troy, and Tom said, I basically, I think, echoing what Donovan had been saying, and just, what is the purpose? Why do we have rape scenes? And so I said, I've been thinking about this a while, and I'm on the fence about it because I think, obviously, or not obviously, but there are probably plenty of people, a vast majority, hopefully, that do not want to see that in their media, any form, whether it's written or visual. I totally get that. But I wonder if in showing it, or actually, let's go this way, if we don't show rape, so then we would be more comfortable with this. Are we portraying an idealistic world that, yes, we hope existed, but unfortunately doesn't? And then do we gloss over these really troubling things that do happen every day? And so then I wonder, maybe it is necessary to have rape and sexual assault scenes. And that sounds so wrong to say. I just wonder, how can we use them well? And so I guess connecting to that, so we had that discussion, and we talked about Night, which recently, that should be out next month, and that connected to because there's certain instances in Night where people come and say, this is happening, you need to get out now, and those people aren't believed, and that connected to victims that are trying to speak out against their victimizer, and not being believed. And then I went to the gym, ironically, and not ironically, what I saw was the news story that I think it was 7 women have accused Cuomo of some sexual advances, sexual harassment, assault, and trying to basically blame the victim, or at least make it seem like they're liars, right, to bring their character down. And then, so all these things, these random things are happening, and then A Promising Woman came out on Redbox. I just got a an email about it, and I went out and got that and watched this, and I thought, oh my gosh, look at all of this stuff that's happening, which connects to the drunken person that you might see. And an intense film, first of all, just a promising woman. I recommend it, but I mean, trigger warning there. I think that perhaps people who have experienced sexual assault or rape, I don't think that you should put yourself in that situation, but it was really good. It was intense. It had a shocking ending, and I was really worried. I don't want to spoil, but I was really worried that the cycle was going to continue, but fortunately the cycle to a certain extent, there's justice in the end. I guess I'll say it that way. I got a bit distracted by Carrie Mulligan's voice. Her voice sounded so deep, deeper than I'm used to. I've seen her in several other films, and it's not as deep as, say, Lauren Bacall. But I just thought, wow, your I don't know, tenor perhaps has really gone down. And I wondered, well, maybe as I've gotten older, my tenor has also dropped. So all of this media is coming into to play, and so that surrounds a traumatic moment for a particular character, and that whole premise is based off of that. So you need, unfortunately, that traumatic sexual assault to happen in order for the rest of that story to take place. I think of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I actually really enjoy, and that it's I think Lisbeth's rape in the beginning might not be necessary, but it connects well with the rest of with the main mystery that you're trying to find out, because there's all this terrible stuff happening to women, and it builds up who Lisbeth is as this avenger of women who have been wronged, and a protector of women. So I think that connects as well, and also there's a connection, or there's a reason behind it, because of this guilt that Stieg Larsson had felt. So there's that too. And I'm just trying to think, Handmaid's Tale, which I unfortunately watched. I did not want to watch it. I don't care for the book, though I recognize its importance in literature, and I think maybe I should give it another try. But I go over once in a while to some friend's house, and we alternate recommendations on things. So the previous time I brought over Gilmore Girls, and we watched a couple of episodes, and they said, well, next time we're going to watch Handmaid's Tale. And I thought, oh no. And we did, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish it, but I ended up, and I didn't think I was going to. I didn't think I'd be able to, but I ended up binging, and I've now finished, I guess, in 2 weeks. I'm all caught up now. And part of it was just I needed to know what was going to happen to these characters and whether they're going to be okay. But that whole series is predicated on rape and that society. And so, even though, I don't know, those sex scenes seem germane because there's not struggling and everything, it's not consent at all. Though it's interesting to, if you've seen it, to juxtapose or at least compare, I guess, the regular ceremonies with one that they do later on with June to induce pregnancy, which was probably one of the worst scenes I had seen that entire series. So, oh man, for art's sake, it seems like sometimes, well, I guess with what I've seen, but I'm pretty cautious about the media that I intake, and if there's going to be a rape, I'm not necessarily going to choose to watch it. But for what I've seen, it seems like there's an importance to it, and there's not levity, and it's not just it's not trivial matter. And with comics, though, I'm trying to think of the last time that I've seen a rape or a sexual assault scene in like modern day. I think, yeah, you just have to be careful. And so that's this thing that I'm trying to figure out is, do we maybe, so I guess it's a controversial question, and this is what I'd like to hear from you, listeners and watchers, and whether this would be maybe a good discussion episode. Do you think that maybe rape and sexual assault scenes, if used wisely, are actually necessary in order to educate and show people that this stuff is out there? Because I feel like if you don't talk about it, people are going to be like, well, it doesn't exist. And there might be some people laughing at that right now, but honestly, think about it. There are some things out there that, I mean, the Holocaust, the night is a perfect example that people are starting to, even in the past. I mean, I know of someone who knows someone who says that the Holocaust is a hoax. So until you, and we're so past, it seems like it's so far past 9/11 that people are forgetting. So if you don't show it, then people feel like it doesn't exist. And we want to get to the point where it doesn't exist. But until we reach that point, I think maybe it is good to have them. It sounds bad, but that's my question. So if you guys, I think that's my big question for you. If you want to take this and email me, or yeah, if you want to have a discussion, I think it'd be great to have a discussion with the canceled Carol and Coca on this. But it's I don't think there's no simple answer to this. It really depends on how it's being presented, but I honestly think that maybe it does need to be presented. But I don't, but also, I don't want it to be repeatedly like everything we see is rape and sexual assault, which seems to happen, right? And SVU, Special Victims Unit, which is actually my favorite Law and Order, but more so because of the characters Benson and Stabler. So, anyways, that's what I've been thinking about, and I didn't want to start off my episode with that as the intro, but that would have been my intro had I not been dropped in a chop shop. So let's move on to more happier things, and this is the Find Your Joy segment, Shag's mac and cheese of comfort and joy. And I would say primarily what's been giving me joy recently actually has been watching older 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 Lupin the Third films. I just decided, and there's so much Lupin the Third material out there, but I thought, you know what if I, like, every weekend, maybe once on a Saturday, once on Sunday, pick a film to watch and watch it. And so I've watched two so far. One was Tokyo Crisis, and the other one I can't remember what it was called, but it had the Bank of the World, and they've been okay. I've not been wow. I think Tokyo Crisis was better. I've not been wowed by them, and they've actually not had the most recent slash modern voice actors in English, which I really love. I just love how the guy who plays Lupin laughs. It just seems totally like Lupin. So, and normally I'm a bit of a snob with anime. I think I tend towards the original Japanese. Some exceptions are the Ghibli films. I do prefer the English voice actors, but with Lupin, I also prefer the English just because I really like the actors that they have for that. But that has been fun, and the games that I've been playing haven't necessarily been joy bringing, maybe because they've been downers. I just finished Beyond Two Souls, and before that, I think was Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and then Little Nightmares, which was, well, that was fun slash anxiety inducing. So yeah, I mean, and same old, just trying to get out there, and I'm applying to jobs now. So that's always interesting. I don't know if that's a find your joy, that's find your anxiety. So there we are. And I hope you guys are doing well and keeping healthy. And I really want to impress upon you, if you've gotten your vaccine, both of them, which I've gotten both of them, blessedly, I please don't be irresponsible. Don't be like, man, I've got it and now I've got this shield around me and I'm protected and I can do whatever I want. Please, that's not the purpose of it. So that's all I ask of you. Okay, so this episode seems like a bunch of random issues that I'm going to be doing. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I could be better, and if I had all the, like, the months, and I was doing that for a bit, but then it just got off. Like with some of these here, I had to do them, and it threw me off on the Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl, Birds of Prey schedule. So I've just got to get through this. So I feel like this episode and then the next episode, I've got some random ones, and I think maybe the following one, which would be May, I think that's going to be Bruce Wayne, Murderer Fugitive. But with the back half, just to tell you what I'm doing there, I am looking at Future State in this episode, and then starting in the next episode, I will be looking at Batman and Nightwing consistently, as long as Barbara has a part to play. Otherwise, it's not really worth my time. So they'll become modern quickies. So pistachio latte. So let's do some of these quickies. First up was Turning Points, which was a 5-issue miniseries that was published in 2001, detailing the progression of Batman's relationship with James Gordon throughout the years. So similar to the Batman and Superman, which now I can't even remember what that was called, that relationship through the years. I guess they happened upon a good thing, and so they're keeping on. And the creators differ throughout the issues, but issue number 3 is Ed Brubaker and Dick Giordano. In 2, I just want to say that Babs does appear having made dinner for her father, but in 3, she has a post the Killing Joke conversation with Batman, who never visited her after she got out of the hospital, and he is shutting people out because he feels guilty and doesn't want anyone else to get hurt. And she calls him a self-centered jerk. Well done, ma'am. She reminds him that they survived, and her father has the same guilt but is suffering alone, so he needs to. Oh man, that sounds just like Officer Down, that Batman just focuses on his own stuff. I really want to talk about that, why he just focuses on his own grief rather than thinking outwardly. That's why I have problems with calling him an empathetic character. I guess he has moments of that, but I just wonder, what is this? Why do you do this? So anyways, that issue, I think that scene in general was pretty important. And wow, what a jerk to not visit after you got out of the not visit one of your family members after they got out of the hospital. So there you go. Then we have Detective Comics 755. Here's Your Hat. What's Your Hurry? April 2001 is the cover date. Writer Greg Rucka, penciler Sean Martinborough, inker Steve Mitchell, colors Wildstorm FX. Bruce Wayne attends James Gordon's retirement party. Oh, sorry. This is where did I get this from? Uh-oh. I think I got it from the DC. No. Oh, yeah, I think I did. The DC Wiki. Yeah, I didn't want to plagiarize since I legitimately copied and pasted. So, anyways, Bruce Wayne attends James Gordon's retirement dinner along with his bodyguard, Sasha Bordeaux, who is embarrassed to be with him, although she suspects there is more to him than meets the eye. She is not buying the Playboy image at all. The dinner is interrupted twice, first by Mangles Manchester, who had failed to plan ahead for the fact that the room would be full of cops and thus far from ideal for getting revenge on Gordon. Second by Two-Face, who takes Sasha as a hostage, but after flipping his coin, the villain offers a moving tribute to his former ally before allowing himself to be arrested. And I just want to say that it's Gordon's retirement party, so of course she's there. So more so in body than in speech bubble. Then there's Detective Comics 758, July 2001. Backup. Oh, whoa. Yeah, the backup. Oh, that's where we're sorry. Okay, we're focusing on the backup, not the main story. And it is History Lesson by Ed Brubaker and Steve Leiber. Barbara Gordon asks Renee Montoya about the new commissioner, Michael Akins, and how he's settling in. His attitude to Batman is particularly interesting, and Montoya explains why this is. Years ago, the work of the police department in Gateway City was undermined by a vigilante named Watchdog. The people of the city refused to cooperate with the police, thinking that Watchdog would solve everything. Unfortunately, a kidnapping investigation went horribly wrong, ending in the death of both the vigilante and the kidnappers, and ensuring that the victim was not found for several weeks, dead, having been locked in a car's trunk for the whole time. However, Akins knows that Gotham City needs Batman, and that frightens him. And okay, so she has dinner with Renee Montoya. Obviously, she's become friends with her after her father's shooting, so we learn about that. And then she slyly asks how the new commissioner is doing. It seems like he is a decent guy, at least from the story that Montoya is telling her. And it also seems like from the introductory conversation that Montoya is still experiencing some compulsory heterosexuality. So it seems like she's dating the men, and it's interesting that's by Ed Brubaker. So she's still working that out right now. But that was pretty good. I want to say something. Oh, it was about, so I was catching up. I was just trying to be sure that she didn't appear, Barbara didn't appear between 755 and 758. And Sasha, I was like, she seems so familiar. I'm pretty sure she's the woman. I mean, I'll find out. In Batman Fugitive, that talks to, is either Dinah or Barbara, and hemming and hawing, and she knows that he's Batman and the other person knows that he's Batman, but they don't tell each other. And I remember reading that random issue for Professor Cheapskate's show. So I can't wait to finally revisit that and have more context. So okay. So the main review that I'm going to be focusing on, and then there's a quickie in the end, or well, oh my gosh, a couple quickies. I'm going to be looking at some Gotham Knights issues. And I'm so sorry I can't do any visual stuff until we get to the second half of this episode, mainly because the way that I was looking at these issues was online, and I feel like if I pull up a browser my computer will explode because of Zoom. So it was already being a little frenetic in the beginning of this recording, so you'll have to take my word for it, but I do really recommend issue 12. So Batman Gotham Knights issue 12, I'm going to focus mostly on that one. That one's going to be a full review. Titled Damages, February 2001 is the cover date. Writer Jen Van Meter, penciler Coy Turnbull, inker John Lowe, and colorist Pamela Rambo. Oh, look, a woman. Two women, I suppose. There is a serial mugger in Gotham City who is only attacking handicapped people, having to use a wheelchair herself. Okay, Barbara Gordon is interested in solving this case. She finds out that the victims all made claims for compensation against those who originally caused their injuries. Barbara decides not to talk to her father or Batman about this case because she knows that both men blame themselves for her paraplegia because she was shot by the Joker who was targeting them. Instead, Barbara works with Alfred Pennyworth to track down a number of people who match the mugger's description. Barbara's final measure is to sue her father for putting her in harm's way. Yeah, you heard that right. Bruce Wayne, she's also suing Bruce Wayne for providing Arkham Asylum with a deficient alarm system and suing Dr. Arkham for not being able to cure the Joker. The hoax works perfectly. The serial mugger breaks into her apartment the next night, but the man did not anticipate Barbara's close combat skills or the policemen who were observing the building all night, and the mugger is arrested. So, I like this, and I will say that with Gotham Knights, I think remember doing this a while ago with somebody, but I like it. I guess it's is that what you would consider an anthology series, but just kind of a side story to, what's going on day in, day out. Some side cases that we don't see because we're focusing on the main books and the main cases there. So I did like that. I thought it was a good story. I mean, it involves a different type of victim and one which of course resonates with Barbara. I can't really think of the last time. Well, let me think about that. I don't know. Like this type of story, I don't feels like the only time I've ever read something like this. I'm glad that she got to detective the mission herself, and she even takes the perp down herself. And the people are kind of freaked out, like, how was she able to do this? And her father's like, I don't even know, but of course she could because she's my daughter. And even her father tells the press that she handled herself well, which was great. So it wasn't just like, oh, giving her every opportunity to do everything, and then the police come in. So I'm glad that the whole issue was about her and really giving her all this agency. It was nice to involve Alfred in the story, and I think it makes sense why she can't talk to her father or Bruce since they feel guilty about why she's in the chair, though I'm not sure why it wouldn't have been Dick or Tim. And even date-wise, February 2001, I feel like she still would have been on good terms with Dick. We know that Dick is going to go, well, there's already a problem in the relationship post Joker last laugh. So I don't know. I guess I would have picked somebody else, but Alfred, hmm, maybe she needed someone who was more of a father figure than a peer, perhaps, and who had been there through it all, probably, and probably visited her in the hospital and post hospital, even though Bruce didn't. So that might be the connection why and going on there. There's a weird scene again. I'm sorry I can't see you or show you. That just a weird scene. It made me feel uncomfortable with Alfred's hands on Bab's shoulders as she's looking at a computer screen. And, not to say that Alfred would do anything that is inappropriate, But I also don't see Alfred as like someone who would touch somebody else. I think he always thinks of himself in a particular station. And besides hugs, I don't know. It's not something that I would have envisioned him doing. Um, I imagine that she warned Jim and Bruce before the press conference, but this probably hit them hard nonetheless to say, hey, I've got this idea. I am going to pretend to sue you because of what happened to me in the Killing Joke. But don't worry, it's a hoax. I'm trying to get somebody out of what is it called? I'm trying to oh words mole them out, rat them out, have them I don't know, have them come, force them out of their hiding place. Let's go with that. And but still hearing that, like, oh man, because to a certain extent the things that she was going to sue them on, she could have absolutely sued them on. And I think, you know, they play a part to that as well. So it probably hurt them, but we don't see it because it is a bad story. So let's not cut away and comfort those when it's not their story. The Killing Joke scenes again, over and over again. I feel like it happens a lot in this particular episode, actually. There are a couple quick cut scenes and other scenes that are difficult to follow or that the narration doesn't really help you. And you have to figure out what Babs is thinking, feeling, or even doing. Really beginning with her errands. And especially with the perp at the end, I mean, how did that even get set up? How did he get in? Or where are they? I mean, the synopsis there, the synopsizer makes the assumption that he just breaks into her place. But I don't know. It's like a whole page was missing. So I think just transitions were really poor in this particular issue. And I was flipping back and forth and figuring out where's the connective tissue. I also really hope people don't actually go people tipping, because she talks about that there are people that push other people that are in wheelchairs over. And I shook my head and thought, please let this not exist. But I think the fact that it's written about and this person knows about it, I don't think they're inventing the wheel. I feel like it probably does actually exist. So I'm sorry that that exists. I'm sorry that there are terrible human beings in the world that would consider doing that. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 wheelchairs. A good story, putting Babs at the center, really giving her agency and taking the men out, really, that she was the tool in their story, so it flipped around and removed them, and she was able to do everything on her own. But the transitions were poor in this particular comic. So there you go, 7. Okay, now 2 quickies to wrap up. Got Batman Gotham Knights 17 Matatoa Part 2, July 2001 is the cover date. Writer Devin Grayson, penciler Roger Robinson, inker John Floyd, and colorist Rob Schwager. Batman battles for his life. Sorry, this is taken from Comixology. Batman battles for his life with the Eternal Shaman, whose destiny includes killing the Dark Knight and taking on his nocturnal crime-fighting duties. It would secure Batman a safe, crime-free Gotham City for all eternity, but at what cost does it all truly come? So Batman wonders why Dick is in Gotham, and oh, that's right. And Dick hems and haws and says he and Babs are pretty seriously involved. So there you go. Batman doesn't have much of a reaction, though Dick wanted him to be happy for them. And Batman says, "Who says I'm not?" Okay. On a later call with Babs, she pretends to not know Dick is in town, and Batman tells her he knows that they're dating. And then she calls Nightwing and tells him he's in trouble because he was supposed to tell her before he was going to tell him about all of this. And near the end, he says and she asks, what? Speak up. And Batman, basically, that he's going to come over to her place. And she says, huh? Speak up. And Batman says he'll be over later. So Nightwing was clearly embarrassed. And also in this particular issue, Batman officially adopts Dick, which I think was huge. And at one point that I want to know, Babs calls Bruce boss, but with no icicle bubbles. And as you are aware, I don't like when she calls him boss. I don't think she would call him boss unless it has icicle bubbles. And I think there is a difference there. So I was disappointed about that. But this continues on. This is a Devin Grayson thing because she calls him boss again in Batman Gotham Knights 18 Cavernous. August Cavernous? No, it's Cavernous. August 2001 is the cover date. Writer Devin Grayson, penciler Roger Robinson, inker John Floyd, colorist Rob Schwager. Again from Comixology, Aquaman guest stars as the Dark Knight realizes that he's become more of a loner since the loss of Gordon, Alfred's leave of absence, and Oracle's anger with him. Batman finds odd comfort in the company of the King of the Seas. So he calls Oracle, this is actually pretty funny, calls Oracle on 3 separate occasions, one after the other. Seems like he's pretty bored and wanting something to do. And each time she's waiting on info. So he calls, what about this? And he's like, yeah, I'll tell you when. And he said, oh, have you thought about doing this? Yeah. But the third time, Dick actually interrupts when he calls and tells him to give it a rest, which I just love. That they're probably hanging out and then he interrupts him. And yeah, I thought that was great. Just put Batman in his place. So there you go. So just to give a feel for that, I think, just looking at my document, I think there might be a couple more of these where I'm just going through random issues, but then I'll start to really have a good momentum and rhythm with just focusing on Batgirl, Birds of Prey, Nightwing, maybe occasionally Robin or Batman, and getting away from some of these random things that pop up. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Okay, so final thing for this part is listener emails. So bear with me. And my only listener email, pretty sure, is coming from Tom Panarese, like already mentioned a couple times in this particular episode. Okay. So from Tom, he says, Stella, I've been meaning to send this email your way literally since episode 200 came out, but a combination of laziness, life stuff, and my thoughts on anything Batman related being about as valuable as that tissue you forgot to remove from your pocket before throwing your pants into the washing machine prevented me from doing so. He does feel like he doesn't want to be a bat splainer because people bat splain to him. Anyway, I'm finally sending the email. So here are some of my thoughts about the past few episodes. Episode 200. I really enjoyed your opening stream of consciousness on empathy and compassion. Although considering you did you you did an entire episode on empathy in literature, I know you are an expert on the topic. What gave me the most pause in a good way were your points about compassion, as well as how you spend some of this segment talking about how your views, opinions, etc. have changed over the past 11 years. I guess I found that to be interesting because to me, that seems to be a given considering the way we grow and hopefully mature. However, our culture works against that. It seems that people are constantly being held to account for old, dusty tweets or something that was said in an interview, despite proof that they still don't feel that way or have acted differently since. Granted, some of that social media outrage is completely justified, but there has to be some sort of rubric or metric of accountability here. I mean, as a longtime listener, I'm not going to chastise you for something you said in a really old episode. Oh boy, aside from your misguided views on raisins, because the evolution of your views is literally recorded. You don't owe an explanation to those unwilling to do their homework. But this is a good topic. But this is a good topic for discussion on a show because there are plenty of, and in bold, he says, questions to ask about it. Not sure how many in bold answers will come up, though. I just to pause on that, that was another thing that I was thinking about. And it's almost like grace. At what point does or how big a part does grace play in this of grace that I'm giving to you and can if you've grown from that experience and I don't know sought forgiveness, hopefully can we forgive you and recognize that that was a bad thing that had happened, but you've moved on. And that's, I mean, that happened in A Promising Young Woman. I almost forgot the title. I don't, oh man. I guess if you don't want to know about a big plot point, maybe you should fast forward a bit. But at one point, the guy that she is dating, who's a really great guy, he seems really is willing to go as slow as possible with her romantically. You find out that he was involved mainly from like he was watching the sexual assault that had happened that's central to the plot. And so that was a huge, oh man, when that, well, it broke up the main character, obviously, and then that broke me up too. I thought, oh no, is there no safety here? But I'm thinking, and he tries to, explain away. He said we were young, we were kids, and that's not the excuse to have. I don't know if he even apologized. I'd have to rewatch. Unfortunately, I gave the red box back. But I'm just thinking if he did, and another problem is he didn't own up to it. He didn't apologize. But since it is in the past, had he done things a bit better, I wonder if there could have been, some grace involved, like, oh, you were involved in this. But with her mind state, or just where she was, I don't know if she would have been able to. But I did think about that, oh man, he was involved. But look at who he is now. So I don't know, but yeah, and another thing is that every day, day to day, and I just I can't believe I did that. And I just finished reading White Fragility, and that's something that I've mentioned before in other conversations, that I could have plenty of racist thoughts, hopefully not throughout the day, but just, something might pop up because of, how, the culture in which I was raised is going to consistently happen. And I need to own it. I need to apologize and learn from it and move on. And so if everything, if all in accounting, if all of my sins were held up and no one was forgiving, I wouldn't be able to move past any of the stuff that I had. So I do agree with you. I think it's really, I think there's also, not a statute of limitations, but are there some things that that are just unforgivable? So that's that's another question. Okay. So back to Tom. As for the Joker's last laugh, I actually never read the storyline back when it came out in 2001. I was only buying a few titles at the time and didn't have the money to spend on a company-wide event. Based on your synopsis and in your interview with Scott Beatty, this story sounds like a fun popcorn concept, but didn't really live up to that potential. I'm not much of a fan of the character these days anyway, because of the way he's been elevated to some sort of, oh, I don't know, pretentious philosophical statement instead of simply being a comic book villain. I loved your interview with Jordan B. Gorfinkel. Gorf! I started reading Batman and Detective right before Gorf became the assistant editor and left the book shortly after he did, so his tenure on the Bat titles defined my Batman phase. Copyright Shaq. I loved hearing some of the inside baseball stuff, especially his explanation of the different looks of Batman during that period. While I wasn't always a fan of some interpretations, i.e., Kelly Jones, that was the person whose name I couldn't remember a couple episodes ago. I've always loved the character's malleability, and the post crisis era, especially the post Nightfall era, epitomized that. Episode 202. Don Shipper picks were great, and I did a fist pump when he mentioned Tim Ariana and Tim Stephanie. I was exactly their age when Tim became Robin, and then Spoiler debuted in tech, so Tim was the comic book character I identified with. I was never as cool as him, though. Oh, Tom, you're cool to me, though. Episode 203. This was fun to listen to, especially since I had never heard of this miniseries before. I don't think it's one I'll seek out, but if I see it in a quarter bin or something, I might give it a look. You guys I was trying to think of what it was. So this is the Orpheus Rising. You guys brought up a few things that I found interesting about comics, the media, and culture. First, there's the coloring of skin tones. Coloring in comics has a long history that would make for a very cool discussion topic on a panel or episode. I agree. I agree. Coloring of non-white characters over the past 80 to 90 years has ranged from innocuous or straightforward. Cyborg skin tone was always just brown, to downright racist, yellow coloring the 1940s for East Asian characters, this weird sunburn looking coloring for Hispanic Latino characters or Latinx characters well into the 1990s. So it does beg the question, which choices in coloring of skin tone were consciously meant to show a non-white race as inferior and which were not? Next, you mentioned the media attention given to disappearances of white people, especially white women, as opposed to people of color. There literally is a term for this, missing white woman syndrome. It gets brought up every few years when there is a high profile missing persons case on the level of Sandra Levy or Natalie Holloway, because there are often people who are also missing, but who don't get media coverage because that doesn't get the ratings. A fun game to play is tallying up the race and gender of missing people or murder victims on shows like Dateline. They tend to be very white and very female. I didn't mean to sound snarky there, BTW, because those are horrific crimes with very real victims. I was simply being critical of the way the media favors certain stories over others. I think we agree with you. Finally, during the episode, you talked about police brutality against people of color, and while you and what and let's see here. Okay. And while I'm, I think there's a slight typo on just, let's see. We've seen the last decade. Well, maybe while I mention what we've seen the last decade, the only older incident mentioned was the Rodney King beating. While that certainly was high profile, I think that the more direct inspiration for some of what is in this miniseries might have been the cases of Abner Louima and Armadou Diallo, which were carried out by the NYPD. Louima, a Haitian immigrant, was arrested in 1997 and during his oh my gosh. And during his interrogation was physically and sexually assaulted by police officers, an incident the department then tried to cover up. Diallo, an immigrant from Guinea who was living in New York and in February 1999 was stopped by the police because they said he matched the description of a serial rapist. At one point during the stop, he reached for his wallet, which the officer said they mistook for a gun. That's the trope, isn't it? Oh my gosh, they shot at him 41 times, hitting him 19 times. This led to a huge public outcry in New York with investigations into the methods used by the NYPD and is one of the enduring legacies of that department under Commissioner Raymond Kelly and Mayor Rudy Giuliani. It is also, by the way, the inspiration for the Bruce Springsteen song 41 Shots. Insert that here. It's just conjecture on my part, but the shooting's proximity to when Orpheus Rising would have gone into production makes me think that Alex Simmons was using it for inspiration or commentary. Okay, that was way too long of an email and probably too mansplaining, so I apologize. Keep up the great work. Well, Tom, I would say that you didn't mansplain because none of those things was I aware of. I think maybe I had known or had heard about missing woman syndrome or not. Maybe I had heard of it, but absolutely do not apologize. I think you are one of the, because you know what I appreciate about him, about Tom, and then I'll comment on this, is that he is really aware of that. And I really do. This is me being genuine. I really do appreciate that. So he, you know, either explain like this is what I'm going to do, or please forgive me, or just doesn't do it at all, really. So that's why I love having him as my co-host for Required Reading. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to actually forward that to Jacob and Shai so that they can see that as well. And I am astounded. I mean, like I said, I went on Wikipedia to see the history of it, and I, for the most part, was just scrolling through and looking at names and what it had, but I didn't look into details. And perhaps this sounds macabre, but perhaps I should just spend time and see this history of people, most especially Black men, being killed and harmed by the police. So thank you for that. Absolutely. Remember, guys, you can send me any questions or comments to batgirl.oracle@gmail.com or post on the episode. I haven't had any of those for a while unless I'm missing them, but I usually get an email. And I think the big question that I wanted to ask about is of course that rape and sexual assault. Do you think that we actually do need, is it maybe important to portray this with gravitas in order to educate and show that these things happen in real life? So that's my question there. And as a sub question, I guess, would you appreciate, I guess, I would love to do a colorism episode, honestly, colorism in comics. I think that would almost be, I would almost want to do a paper on that, to be honest. That could be a thesis paper. I think that would, if I sit down to do that, it's going to take some heavy research. And so I think that would be a big endeavor that I couldn't be like, I'm going to do this next month. I would have to sit down and take some time, but I'd love to do a colorism episode. And I think I'd like to do one on rape and sexual assault, but both of those I think need to be really, colorism I think just needs more research. And the rape and sexual assault one I think needs some major caution. So some food for thought. I mean, would you guys like to hear stuff, discussion on that? I don't know. Okay. So thanks again, Tom. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. So I think that's it for this particular part. Yeah. And then when you come back, the light will change because I think it's getting to, maybe it'll be okay. Maybe I can make it. So when I come back, I'm going to look at Future State, The Next Batman 2 and 4. I called the backup. And, well, you'll have a surprise when you tune into the next part. But first, it's Zaius's Radio Hour featuring the Big Doll House from Hairspray, the Broadway musical. See you guys soon.